I think we're ready to start the webinar. Thanks again to everyone who's joined us today. I'm really pleased that HdK are presenting this webinar today. We were recently invited to deliver a couple of webinars for Society of London Theatre and UK Theatres as part of their Theatre Means Business website. The idea was to give helpful training and insight to a sector that is clearly struggling with coronavirus at the moment and with many of our colleagues on furlough leave. We donated all the proceeds from those webinars to the Acting for Others charity and we'll continue to support that charity. And you can view both of those webinars if you go to our blog on our website, as well as the Theatre Means Business website, where there's a lot of other blogs that I think the industry will find useful. But also just to note on this one, different from the other ones, we're known for specialising in the arts sector, but we also work with clients outside of the arts sector. So for this as our own hosted webinar, we're very keen to open up the topics that we talk about and the references that we make in our webinar today to the wider community. We enjoy the opportunity to work with sectors, all sectors, and we like to think that we can bring that little bit of extra artistic flair to those industries. So today we are talking about the value of unifying your communication platforms, particularly your digital platforms, and all that entails. With everything that's happening in our lives at the moment, marketing and getting your message out there is going to be so important in times like this. With people's priorities dramatically shifting, for any business or organisation trying to survive, a strong unified presence and message is going to be essential. So with that, the team has spent some time contemplating how you can achieve that with your digital platforms. We're going to review how you can ensure your branding and website are as strong as possible. We're going to look at how you can unify your presence across social media platforms with really polished content. And we're going to consider how to take a strategic view when planning this. We're going to give you a process that you can follow. But first, let me talk a little bit very quickly about HdK. We like to help those that are doing great things create lifelong audiences and customers online. We started back in 2004, which happens to be the year that Facebook started. So we've always been involved in social media and digital web presence. We've worked with over 300 clients, helping them build and manage their websites, creating online digital content and running social media and digital advertising campaigns. So joining me today, well, we've got the whole team on, but joining me and speaking today is going to be my colleague Phoebe. She's our marketing manager, and she works with our clients developing strategies and campaigns. We're also joined by Freya, who's our marketing coordinator, who implements those plans for our clients and keeps us up to date with the latest changes in social media. And finally, Nick is our project manager, but he's also an incredibly experienced web developer as well. So he's going to be sharing his insights as well. So I want to jump on and get started as quickly as possible because there's a good bits to cover. So I'll hand over now to Nick.
Thank you very much, Hans. I'd like to start my segment today with a poll. I would like to ask you all, what's your favourite popsicle flavour? A, strawberry, B, coconut, or C, kiwi? Now, my apologies for asking quite a summary poll on quite possibly one of the most miserable days we've had yet this year. But all will become clear very soon. And while you cast your votes, I'd like to introduce my segment today. I'll be talking about how you can unify your brand and your website, how you can make the link between the two as strong as possible. So I think you've all had enough time now. Let's see what the results are. Overwhelmingly strawberry popsicles, coconut, 17% kiwi. Good, I'm in the kiwi camp. Great, amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, so the reason for that will become clear very soon. But first, I'd like to talk about the notion of the digital shopfront. Now, hundreds of years ago, well, maybe just 20 to 30 years ago, the world didn't have the internet, or at least it wasn't readily accessible. Smartphones didn't exist and broadband didn't make sense. Businesses had shopfronts or workshops or showrooms, physical spaces you could visit and enlist services or purchase products. You still can today, of course. It's just that with the advent of the internet, a person's first experience of your company is normally online, not in your shop. And it's important to note here that by shop, I also mean office or theatre or art centre, whichever applies to you. Instead, companies now have digital showrooms, websites. When talking about websites, we often like to use this analogy of a building or a house, because that's what a website is. The address is your domain name. The wallpaper and carpet are your design choices. The furniture is your content. In a physical showroom, a lot of thought goes into the interior design. Careful decisions are made about the color of the walls, the feel of the upholstery, the amount of space and lighting, because they all contribute to the visitor's experience. That is, the visitor's experience of you and your brand. So too should careful thought go into your website design. Just like the physical showroom, the website is a distillation of your brand. It's an opportunity to craft a user experience that shares your ethos and culture. Start treating your website like a showroom. Start treating website visits as experiences. So let's step back from this analogy for a moment and talk about how we can communicate your brand through your website. We can break this down into two main components: the design, or the wallpaper and the carpet, and the content, which is basically your furniture. Let's start with the design. There are a number of design principles you can focus on to get started. First, there's your signage, basically your logo. Just as you would in a shop front, you want this above the door. That's pretty straightforward. Second, there's the typography. A font can say an awful lot about your business. Make sure you're putting as much thought into your typeface as you are your logo. It is a visual representation of the cadence of your voice. Whether serif or sans serif, choosing a font should be part of your website design process. Here, we've provided examples of how even the type of font can have a big effect on your tone of voice. Unsure of where to start, we recommend Google Fonts. Most website builders integrate freely with Google Fonts nowadays, allowing you to pick from a range of high-quality, free fonts. But have the budget for something more unique? Get a subscription with Adobe Creative Cloud and choose from their own font library. Up next, there's space. Just like in a physical showroom, space is an important design variable often underused. Use it to help separate and lift your content. Finally, and by no means least, there's color. Think about your color scheme. What mood are you conveying? Does it reflect your brand? Does it enhance your content? If you're stuck for a color palette, we recommend Coolers. It's a really fun color palette generator that's totally free. Have a play. Let's move away from design now and on to our second component, the content. Content is the substance of your website. It's the heart and soul. And because of this, it is also the most important variable you have control over when it comes to communicating your brand. It should be your mission to create compelling content experiences that are engaging, intelligent, and scalable. Let's have a look at how different types of content can communicate your brand. First up is the copy. Be sure to write copy that has a tone of voice, much like your brand. If you have enough budget, it might be worth hiring a copywriter. Imagery is next. But I like to include in this illustrations and graphics. It doesn't necessarily have to be photographic, which is useful if you don't yet have those assets. The maxim is true. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and careful decisions about imagery on your website can help communicate your brand. But what if you don't have the budget to employ a photographer or a graphic designer? You could use stock libraries. There are plenty of free, royalty-free stock libraries out there, but we recommend Unsplash. Indeed, that's where most of the images in this presentation have come from. With the advent of YouTube and Vimeo, videos on websites are commonplace these days. Internet speeds are up, as is compression quality. So with the right settings, you can serve high definition video to the majority of your website visitors. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, a video is worth 1 million. Invest in a show reel and put it in your shop window. Here's one of our clients, English National Ballet School. To announce their new building, they filmed a brilliant show reel for their school and we embedded it on the home page. It's known to improve engagement and can bridge the gap between the digital space and the physical space. Finally, think about digital moments. This is a phrase we've coined here at HdK to represent experiences of websites that encourage interactivity. Bringing my segment full circle, let's talk about the Popsicle Hotline. According to TripAdvisor, the Magic Castle Hotel is the 4th best hotel in Los Angeles. First on the list is the Four Seasons in Beverly Hills. It averages 4.5 stars from over 3,000 travelers. Now, you'd expect with these reviews that the hotel bears a close resemblance to the Four Seasons. In fact, it's quite the opposite. A converted 2-story apartment complex from the 1950s, the Magic Castle is painted canary yellow and has a near palm-sized swimming pool. From the photographs, it looks below average at best. So, how does it garner such sought-after reviews? It has a Popsicle Hotline. The Popsicle Hotline is a red telephone by the swimming pool. Pick it up and you'll hear, "Hello, Popsicle Hotline." Order a popsicle in any flavor and moments later, a waiter will appear at your sun lounger carrying the popsicle on a silver tray, white gloves and everything. What's more, it's totally free. It's memorable moments such as these that have earned Magic Castle Hotel seriously good credit on TripAdvisor and other review forums alike. So, what's the lesson here? It's that you don't have to have the bells and whistles of the Four Seasons to make a good impression. Instead, you can focus on making small, magical moments that share your brand. And we can do this on your website using interactivity. Digital moments are interactive experiences that engage the visitor, communicating your brand. They're typically creative, think outside the box features. And because they promote engagement, you can normally measure it and learn more about your visitors. Want a real-world example of a digital moment? Rather than show you, I want you all to experience one yourself. So after this webinar, go to getcoleman.com and have a play. And once you've had a play, let us know what you think. And that concludes my website segment for this webinar. I'd like to ask you all now if you have any top tips you could share with the group on how to strengthen your brand on your website. Take-home tools or principles you've learned. Write them in the chat below.
Thanks, Nick. I'm just looking at the chat right now and waiting for some people to see if we've got any principles that they've learned coming through. Sally Marie has asked just to know what she'd love to have a look at some of the websites that you've designed, and would just like to know which ones you'd recommend to look at.
Well, actually, that's a really good question. On the topic of digital moments, so websites that have content that entices through interactivity, have a look at our Ennio Marketo website. So if you go to our portfolio on wearehdk.com, find Ennio Marketo. If you don't know who he is, he's an Italian performer who lip syncs to songs with incredible paper costumes. And we were approached by Ennio and his team to try to create a website that had the same amount of fun as his shows. And we did just that. So that's also a really good example of digital moments. Have a look at that website. It's really fun.
We'll try and share the link for that website as well, just so that you can find that easily.
Great. So I'll keep moving on then. So thanks, Nick, for telling us how we can get all of our branding really great on your websites through things like images, colour palettes and typography. Now let's have a look at how this can be filtered through into your social media accounts. Now, branding is typically associated with things like print media, emails, newsletters and websites. However, social media is becoming more and more of a relevant way for companies to connect with their online audiences. And more than often, if people want to know more about a company or brand or product, they're looking to their social media accounts to find more. And a study by Global Web Index in 2020 found that 54% of social media browsers are using it to research products. Therefore, you want your social media to maintain a high quality branding and consistency so that you can appear trustworthy, professional and reliable. Your social media accounts need to effectively support your brand and website and maintain that consistent and polished approach. In order to do this, it is important that your social media channels are unified and are holding strong, coherent brand messages. So for the purpose of this webinar, I'm going to particularly look at Facebook, Instagram and Twitter and how you can unify these three platforms. Now, just to kind of help demonstrate this easily and effectively, how you can transfer this branding from your website onto your social media accounts, I'm going to look at the case study of Leon, a natural food restaurant. So first of all, here is Leon's website page. And now if we just look here, we can get some key messages about their branding from looking at the sort of things that Nick has mentioned previously. So looking at the colour palette they're using. So they've got quite pastel-y, light, very kind of fresh colours. We've also with their images. So the hand holding the orange is quite a prominent image in this page. And also the typography. So that just gives us a bit of a feel for the brand and what sort of brand messages that they're kind of getting across through their website. Now let's look at how they've transferred this from their website onto their social media platforms. So this is their Instagram, Twitter and Facebook platforms. Now, we can see here that they've continued to use that same image of the hand holding the orange across all three social media platforms in their profile image. We can also see that through their cover image, they're using the same typography and similar sort of pastel-y, kind of fresh looking colours on their cover image. So it's really great to see how they've transferred those key images and those key kind of branding tools through onto their social media accounts. Now let's look at how you can apply this to your company's social media accounts. Now, if you're not kind of comfortable or familiar or feeling confident with social media or maintaining different channels and understanding how the different platforms work, it can sometimes feel quite overwhelming to try and unify them and make sure that your brand is really consistent across them. However, for most key social media channels, there are 4 assets that you can ensure are unified, clear and professional. And I'm going to refer to these as the basics. So these tend to be the same across most social media channels and are the first thing that your followers will see when they go onto your social media page. And they are the profile and cover image and the colour palette that's used in those images, your handle and your bio. Now, the profile and cover image, companies tend to use the same profile image across their social media accounts, and we would suggest this too. So it's really good to maybe use a logo, something that's really clear, really recognisable to your brand or your company in your profile image. The cover image can be updated more regularly and may specifically focus on an event or a product that you're looking to promote at that moment in time. So here they're promoting a cookbook, so it's out now, but again, it's consistent throughout all the social media channels. Your handle is kind of a search tool for all of your followers to find your social media accounts quickly and easily. So this would be really useful to make sure that your handle is, again, the same across your social media channels. So when people are looking for you, say on Facebook, and then they think, I want to have a look at you on Instagram, they just know that to search that handle and your account will come up. And then your bio. This is a short message at the end, which is kind of a sentence or two, just summarising your company and your brand as a whole, or what your services are. So again, it's really important that this is really clear, consistent, and the same across your 3 channels. So a useful exercise after this webinar might be to go straight to your social media accounts and perform a quick audit across your channels and look at these 4 basic points and see whether you can make any improvements. And then after that, it's important to then maybe in the diary, book to review those 4 basic points on a 3-month basis. And just make sure that the profile image, the cover image, and the text all still feel really current and in keeping with your brand message. So now we've established how you can have a clear brand through those basic elements. Another way or aspect to look at is your social media content and voice. Now your content and voice relates to what you're posting on social media in terms of your images, videos, and captions. So looking at the content here on the social media channels, it is clear for Leon that they've got a strong branding that's remaining and that is consistent across their posts too. So if we look at their post here, again, they're using a very similar colour scheme and also the same sort of typography. We can also see that they're posting quite similar content across the platform. So there's a clear kind of running theme across all of their key platforms on social media. Now, to ensure that you can have a clear brand in your social media content and captions, there's a couple of things that you can look at. One of them is your tone of voice. And a great way to do this is looking at establishing your company's personality. So as Nick mentioned, it's important to have a tone of voice through your content on your website. It's also important to have that tone of voice in your captions on social media. So I think it's really useful to kind of look at your company as a person and think about their personality traits and how they would interact on social media or how they would speak on social media. You can then use that as a way to influence your captions when you're writing on social media and maintain that strong company voice that reflects your brand values. Another way you can do this is structuring a clear plan for your content that you're going to use across social media. Now, of course, your content may depend or may vary depending on your audiences and platforms. It is important that there are some common themes or links in your content across all your social media platforms. And this may just be in terms of your images and using that same sort of colour scheme or using particular logos so that when people see your content, they know it's your brand and they know it's your voice speaking on that social media channel. Now, let's just have a quick look at how you can get creative and get creating some of this content to ensure that your social media accounts are maintaining your brand and are unified. And this can help you, look at creating graphics for social media posts, for your cover images, or for your profile images. And it can be particularly useful if you're maybe got a low budget and you can't afford to use a designer to do this at this moment in time. Now, when you are creating content, whether that be for your cover image or for your profile image, it's really important to recognise the different dimensions across the social media platforms. So just to make sure that you know that the image you're using fits those dimensions and you're not cropping out any integral part of that image or text. Now, there are many places where you can easily create simple graphics for your profile or for your content for social media. And one of these is Canva, which is a free online tool which provides a selection of templates for social media graphics. And I know now that we're going to quickly post that link into the chat group. So if you want to have a look at that website, it would be a really great place to start. Now, Canva are just really useful. They have a free subscription or they have a paid subscription. And it's a great way that you can just use simple templates to create really clear graphics that are going to reflect your brand across your social media posts and make sure that you're keeping up all of your brand kind of image that links to your website and your company as a whole. Now, before we move on to the next section, I just wanted to take an opportunity to see if anyone else has any sites that they would recommend for maybe creating graphics online, or if there's any kind of particular sites that they've found really useful when creating maybe a cover image or a social media post. Okay, so for organisations with such as artists, for the company or the individual. So I think for when the company has a, so Hans has just said, for organisations with well-known leaders, such as an artistic director or someone famous in their own right, do you recommend having a platform for the company or for the individual? I would probably recommend having a platform for the company, and I suppose it can vary, and it may depend on who's controlling the platform. But I think if you have a platform for the company, it's really clear that it's going to talk about just all those elements about the shows that company is putting on, and you can still bring in the artistic director through that company platform and still reference them and then make them very much so at the forefront of that platform. But having it for the company helps to just have that professional feel, but it may vary and depend on who is kind of controlling those social media platforms. So Julie, would you recommend having a different role for each platform, or they post the same content across all three? So for the different platforms and the content on different platforms, we tend to find that each platform is unique in a way that we would use it. So Facebook, we usually tend to say that's to inform people or keep people up to date. Twitter, we find that followers usually go to Twitter to communicate with a company or a brand, or to have some sort of running dialogue with a company or brand. And then for Instagram, usually we use that to kind of inspire. So although you do want to have common themes with your content across all three platforms, you may want to change your captions or how you deliver that content so that it really fits that audience on that platform, and you're really appealing to what that platform is best used for. And so it's definitely important to remember the different kind of usages or capacities that those platforms have, and the best way to access the audiences on that platform.
That's a really good question as well, because we're going to be looking in a bit more detail at how you want to vary your content and why that's important, as we look at social media strategy. So perfect, that kind of takes us on to the next section. Of course, if anybody has any more questions, just leave them in the chat and we'll make sure that we answer them throughout. So Freya's been talking us through how you can get creative, optimizing your social media profiles and brand voice and that kind of thing. So what I'm going to talk about now is how to take all of those elements and more and organize them into a social media strategy that will really strengthen your brand messaging, and put you in the place where you know that the content that you're putting out is reflective of the content that is your branding, your website, and it's all unified as best possible. So we're going to start with an analogy, copying Nick on this one. So we're going to think about your brand as a selection of ingredients and your social media as the different dishes that you create with them. Of course, the base of any meal is a set of ingredients, whether it's fruit, vegetables, meat, carbohydrates, spices, whatever it is. Each meal is made up of lots of different ingredients, and these can be things that provide lots of different factors such as flavor, nutritional benefits, textures, and you want to make sure that in each meal you serve, you're showcasing each of those unique factors. And there's a variety of ways that you can serve or prepare each ingredient to really let each of those things shine through. You might also want to account for the different tastes and preferences of the people that you're cooking for. So, for instance, if your ingredients are broccoli, salmon, potatoes, and Stilton, and you know that one of the people that's coming to your dinner party loves soup, you could make a bowl of really nice creamy soup so that you know that they're happy and you're giving them something that they love. But not everybody likes soup. So for those people, you could make grilled salmon. You could make, roast broccoli, potatoes, and you know that they're happy with what they've got. You might even have somebody at your dinner party who is into MasterChef and all of that fancy cooking. So you could make an ice cream or some cocktails made from broccoli, salmon, potatoes, and Stilton. And for some people, I don't know, maybe most people, that might sound disgusting, but it's important that you cater to everybody so that the ingredients that you're trying to showcase aren't lost on anybody whatsoever. Yeah, most people find that disgusting, Hans. So I'd actually quite like to try it, but I don't know if I'd have it more than once. So basically the point I'm making is not obviously that you can make all kinds of crazy dishes with ingredients at home, but also that there is a variety of ways that you can present and communicate your brand with different people. And social media is basically the perfect example of this. And Freya kind of really helpfully spoke through the different platforms and what people use them for. You know, people go to Instagram for something completely different to what they go to Facebook or Twitter for. And the experience is just completely different. But that doesn't mean that your brand is lost at all. It's just communicated in a different way. So it's important that you tailor your content across each platform to really factor that in. And with so many platforms or options available, with different post types and audiences to target, different preferences to factor in, it can be very easy to get overwhelmed and not know where to start. So that's why a social media strategy is really important, to make sure that you're showcasing your ingredients or your brand in the best possible dishes or platforms, while still maintaining what makes your brand unique. So the different flavors and textures that you have. So I'm gonna finish on the food analogy now. I know we're coming up to lunchtime, so I'm sure you're probably grateful for that. So let's talk about what we mean by social media strategy. So by social media strategy, I mean a cohesive document outlining how you plan to use social media to communicate and promote your brand. And there are lots of different factors that this should contain, and we've listed a few of them on the screen now. So I'll just go through each of these and break them down a little bit more. So first and foremost, you should lay out your aims and objectives, what you want to achieve with your social media strategy. So your aims are your overarching goals. What do you want to achieve by being on social media and posting on social media? So when I say overarching, these would be things like, I want to grow my audience on social media, or I want to communicate with this specific audience. And your objectives are how you break that down into measurable goals. So for instance, if your aim is, I want to grow my audience on social media, you might have a list of objectives like, I want to reach this number of followers on Facebook, and so on, so that you have something that you can measure throughout your strategy. It should also have an analysis section, and this is actually a very important step because it's really how you start to understand where you're at and how you can improve moving forward. So this might want to contain analysis of your competitors. So have a look at each of their platforms. How are they performing? You know, how many followers do they have? What's their engagement rate? What kind of content are they posting? How often are they posting? And like a SWOT analysis, is there anything that they're doing that's really good that I could learn from? Or are they missing out on something that we could capitalize on because they're not doing it? Also have a look here at your own performance. So where are we right now? And that helps you to identify where you want to be. Another thing that you could look at here is current social media trends. So, you know, do a bit of research on the algorithms, and have a look at what kind of content's working really well on social media right now so that you can incorporate that into your plan. As well as this, we've got which platforms you plan to use and how. Like we've said, there's a huge amount of platforms available. So you want to identify which ones you think are going to be most valuable to you. And you can also lay out how you're going to use each of them. I know that we've spoken about how we use them, because how, you know, people tend to go to Instagram for inspiration and so on and so forth. But having this laid out is really useful for you to go back to when you're planning content and say, okay, how do I need to differentiate the content between each of these platforms? And what should my focus be on this one right now? The next thing that should be included is the tactics that you'll use to employ your social media strategy. And this will be things like your brand voice. We like to make a brand voice table, and think about, you know, kind of between 5 and 10 brand voice characteristics, and examples of these in use, what to avoid and that kind of thing, so that you can go back, if you're not feeling too confident about how to speak in your captions, you can go back to that brand voice table and you can think, okay, does this fulfill, you know, at least 3 to 5 of these brand voice characteristics, to help you make sure that you're communicating as your brand and not yourself as a person. Also in the tactics will be the content ideas, which is kind of tying in with what Freya has spoken about. And the content ideas should ideally also really reflect the content on the website and your branding, so that we have that real unified presence. As well, you might want to put in hashtags here and different key marketing dates that might be useful for you. So for instance, if your brand is Colston Bassett Stilton, you would want to look out for things like National Cheese Day or something like that. Also in the strategy, you might want to lay out a budget, and whether your budget is 0 or whether your budget is, you know, a certain amount of money per month, this is where you'll organize what you're going to spend on social media, whether it's for a management platform, whether it's paying somebody to come on, or whether it's paying for social media ads. Having a schedule, and this can be like a bullet point for each month, what you're going to do internally that month to deliver your strategy. So that would be, for instance, you know, July, create strategy, brief team on strategy, start to plan out content, and just that kind of thing, so you know what you have to be doing at any point within the strategy period. And also very important, how and when you're going to review this process. So have a look at diarizing, whether it's, you know, once a month, 3 months in, 6 months in, going through your aims and objectives and just looking at, am I achieving these? Can I make any tweaks to what we're doing to help me achieve these? And just making sure that you're on top of how you're performing and what you're doing. So really, your social media strategy should contain entirely how you're going to use social media to promote your brand beyond your branding and your website. And having this in place will give you a much stronger idea of who you are and how you should present that online. So we've actually got some really helpful resources in terms of finding out a bit more about building a social strategy. Firstly, we recently sent a newsletter. We do a monthly newsletter where we send you an email on a different digital marketing topic each month. And our first one in June was on building a social media strategy. And it goes through each of these steps in a lot more detail. Stella, my colleague, is actually going to share the link for that. So if you are on our mailing list, then you will be able to look at that now. So hopefully that might be helpful for some of you. As well as that, we also offer consultation as an agency. So, you know, this might be, if you want to manage your social media internally, we can help you optimize your social media, build your own strategy, and enable you to confidently move forward with your social media presence while managing it yourself. And it just gives you that peace of mind that you're doing the right thing, and you've got this kind of expert opinion and research behind you. We also create our own strategies. So this is perfect for if you know that you should be doing more, you're short of time, and you just want that input in terms of what you should be doing, and you know, you need somebody to roll that out for you. So there's lots of things we can do to support you. And if you have any questions or you just need a second opinion on your digital plans, drop us an email, send us a tweet. We've got all of our details in the slides at the bottom. We're always kind of happy to hear from you guys. Before we move on to the next section, which will be about scheduling posts in advance, I just wanted to check, because I know that we've just covered quite a lot in a short space of time, if anybody has any questions about social media strategy, anything that they're working on right now that they're not sure about, you're more than welcome to ask some questions. So we have the first question: how often should you update your strategy? Which is a very good question, and I think this kind of thing is very much dependent on your time and how much of a priority social media is to you. So I would suggest updating your social media strategy once every year, because it is, you know, it can take a little while to do. and it is incredibly valuable. But if you're doing it more than once a year, that might become, you know, a lot of work for you. But having those review processes throughout means that your strategy will constantly be serving you throughout that year. So you don't feel like you're getting behind at any point. In terms of how long your social media strategy should be, again, that's very much kind of like, how long is a piece of string kind of question. You know, I think a social media strategy should be a working document, that when you're doing your social media, if you have any kind of, you know, you want to check something or you want to refer back to anything, you can look back at it. So you don't want it to be this, like, you know, massive folder of information, but at the same time, you don't want it to just scratch the surface. So I think it's more about value than length.
Also,
yes.
I would add that when you do it, if you're doing it a yearly basis, once you've done the first strategy and you've put all of that work in the first time round, actually, if you're just reviewing it once a year or something like that, then it's not so onerous to do that, is it?
Yeah, exactly. And also some things that we've done in the past, you can also create a bit of a summary for your strategy document, so that you've got key messages, key points that you want to bear in mind pulled out, and you can just refer back to like a 2-page document and just have a look at that. We've got a couple more questions. So Julie asks, we have a small marketing team, even smaller now, and social media can be hugely time consuming, particularly Twitter. Any golden nuggets of tips on how to do it well without being a full-time job? Yeah, that's a huge challenge for a lot of our clients, because they understand, particularly now, digital is one of the most important things that brands need to be considering. Yet they have all of the other things that they need to be working on right now. So yeah, people are being pulled in different directions. I think having things in place like a strategy, and we'll kind of move on to how you can plan that out. So having a calendar, scheduling that in advance, that really helps, because then you've got all of it there. I think from my personal perspective, you know, in previous jobs where I've had, you know, loads and loads of accounts to manage, being able to organize it in advance makes it as easy as possible on a day-to-day to manage it moving forwards, and then it doesn't take up so much time. So setting that initial time aside to do the planning really pays dividends moving forwards. So yeah, that's probably what I would recommend. And yeah, I think setting aside any time you can to look into how you might be able to save time moving forwards is also worthwhile. So another question is from Wayne. So how to create a unified voice when your projects vary significantly in tone? And that's a really interesting one, because for some of the clients that we work on, for instance, with Dance Consortium, we work on different dance tours, and each of those tours will have different themes, very different visuals and that kind of thing. So we have to really think quite carefully about how we communicate those tours while still remaining the voice and brand for Dance Consortium. So I think to help you do that, you know, bearing in mind your brand voice, I think that's so important. When you're giving different messages, your brand voice is so crucial to holding that all together and ensuring that your personality isn't lost. There's also a number of things that you can do, like if you do have different shows or different products and that kind of thing, ensuring that you're kind of, you know, you might be able to lay your logo over some of the visuals and that kind of thing, and use your brand hashtags. So there's certain steps that you can take to unify your content without losing the individual elements of it. Let's see, we've got a few more questions. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just catching up on these questions now. Let's see.
Maybe it's worth moving on to the next bit, Phoebe, because I know you're talking about scheduling and there's a discussion going on about Hootsuite.
Yeah.
So you can pick up on that, perhaps.
Perfect. Yeah, and then anything that we don't cover, we can go back to at the end. So yeah, it's great. It's great to see you all engaging with the webinar. So thank you for all your questions. Okay, so The final section, and then we can move on to a bit more of a discussion, is about scheduling posts in advance, and how planning your content and scheduling it in advance can really help you deliver that brand impact. So I'm going to ask you if you can remember what plans you have for the rest of the month, even what you're doing next week or the weekend after, whether you have penciled in some Zoom drinks with friends, which we all seem to be doing, 3 a night these days, or a socially distanced barbecue when the weather's a bit nicer, or a meeting with a client. Some of you might be able to tell me what you're doing this weekend, which I would actually be quite impressed by. But beyond that, you'd probably have to check your calendar to let me know what you're doing. I definitely would. I rely quite heavily on my calendar. And we all do, to kind of help us to stay organized. And this is not a weakness at all. It doesn't mean that we've got rubbish memory. It just means that we've got so many other things going on in our lives. And by using a calendar, you are understanding that you need to organize your time effectively. You can't rely on yourself to do all of these things, because that's when you're going to slip up and make mistakes, and we don't want that. So we wouldn't rely on our memory for important social plans. So we wouldn't rely on our memory for social media plans, is the point that I'm getting at here. And so organizing your social media posts, your digital activity into a calendar can be really, really valuable, because having it all mapped out in a clear, visible way means that you can kind of check in on a weekly basis, monthly basis, and make sure that at all times you're sharing the best possible messages about your brand and what you're up to at any one time, and at the best possible time. So for instance, do you have an important event or marketing activity or launch coming up that you need to promote? Putting all of your promotions for this into a calendar will strengthen your approach, and also make sure that you avoid that horrible kind of pushy sales kind of effect that we sometimes end up having when we're short of time and we know that we need to push it. So basically, yeah, it means that you don't miss any opportunities, and you're not kind of clumsily approaching your social media. Here we've got an example on screen of how that might look. We like to use Google Sheets for our social media calendars because it's live, you can update it live. Stella is actually going to share the link for this because it's just an example. It's like a template. Thank you, Stella. So quick with the links. I'm so impressed. But yeah, so it means that you can share it between team members. You can all kind of work on it, and you don't have to keep resending attachments and stuff like that. You can also share it with, if you need to send it to a wider team or somebody else outside of your organization, they can have a look at that. So it's really useful to have it all in one place. If anybody has any recommendations for how they plan or map out their content, then please do comment, because I'm sure it looks like you guys are kind of helping each other with tips. So that's really great. And once you've got your content mapped out like this in a calendar, you can also get ahead and start scheduling your posts to go live. And this also kind of feeds back into the whole time saving thing. Scheduling in advance means that you can focus on all the other demanding things that you have in your role. The benefits of doing this, aside from time saving, are that you can schedule it in advance, and you can look at it and make sure that you're 100% happy with the visuals. You can also share your login and get team members, or your manager, whoever it is that might need to approve it, to have a look and let you know that they're also happy. It's also very easy, because it's all in one place, to see that you've got consistency across all the platforms, like Freya was saying is so important. It's also great for you to ensure that you've got a strong brand voice and it matches throughout. There's no jarring kind of tone that you're using. And you can also see that you're prioritizing key messages. And for instance, it can be more flexible when you schedule it in a platform. So if you think, oh gosh, we've got an event next week, and so far the tickets are selling a bit slower than we thought they might be, but we've only got one post and it's the day before the event. So let's move that forward and add a bit in. So it's, you can be a bit more flexible, which is really good. And yeah, it's efficient. You can plan it all in one place, and it saves you loads of time switching between the different platforms. So platforms to use to do this, we would out of the ones that we've used, we'd recommend Hootsuite. And Stella's going to share the link for that in the chat at lightning speed, as usual. So Hootsuite is really good. It has free and paid for plans. So the free version is actually quite good. You can still do all of the scheduling. You get basic analytics, but with the paid ones, you get a bit more. So that's worth looking into. And even the paid ones, they are quite affordable. So Hootsuite is a very affordable version of that. Also worth looking at is Sprout Social. This is one that I had a lot of experience working on in my previous role, and it's a little bit more expensive, but you get a huge amount of analytics, and the interface is really nice. It also has a calendar function actually, so it might mean that you can you know, combine the whole planning in advance and scheduling content in advance. So yeah, those are two options, and I think the links will be in the chat for you if you want to check those out. Of course, if you use any that you'd like to recommend, again, please leave them in the chat. But with all of that said, having a strong social media strategy and the different tools in place to roll this out, your social media presence should confidently reflect all of the work that you've put into building that beautiful branding and your website that you're so proud of. Being consistent with all of those will help you make sure that you're sharing the best possible messages across all of your digital platforms. But to kind of wrap this up, because I know that we need to finish and get some questions going, I'll pass you back to Hans.
Right, thank you, Phoebe. And thank you for all the questions that are coming in. Do add some more. I've picked out a few that we'll share. And as I said, anything that we don't get a chance to answer within the next 5 minutes, we will respond after the session and put in the follow-up email that will go with this webinar. So yeah, please continue. In the meantime, thank you to my colleagues Phoebe, Freya and Nick. I can't quite believe that each of them have picked out food themes in their presentation. So we had the popsicles, we had Leon, we had all those fancy ingredients for ice cream. So I don't know what that says about us, but maybe we need to go away and think about that. In the meantime, I'll read out a few questions. The first one, I think, is from Rachel. What's your opinion on sharing the same content across all channels occasionally? I know you need to optimize to specific platforms and audiences, but sometimes if we spend ages editing a video, we want to post it on all platforms. Is it better to do this on the same day or across different days?
Yeah, that's I think that's a really good question. I think there's certain key content for your brand that I think is, you know, it is valuable to share it across all your platforms. Like you said, it's kind of like your hero content that you put all of your work into. So if you're going to be sharing it across all platforms, I think it's best to share it on the same day, but have a look at the analytics and check what time will get the most impact on each of your platforms. And it's just important to remember between that, just make sure that you're giving people who go to each of your platforms something different of value. So it's a fine balance.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that you can really change that as well with your captions and just how you kind of frame that content as well. So you can use your captions there as well to kind of differentiate between the different platforms.
Yeah.
Great. So I'll save all the other questions for the follow-up email. So thank you for submitting those. And it's not too late to add any more things that are on your mind. So please do. What I would really appreciate, it's always good, we spend the time on these webinars. And obviously a lot of us have been sitting on webinars over the last few months. The risk is that we take in and we learn things and then we do nothing about it. So maybe as a sort of a commitment, if people can share in the chat box a takeaway that they've got from today that they think they might be able to action, or either just something that's something new for you, it'd be great for you to put that in the chat box, and then that might inspire some other people in the chat box. So please add that. in now. And while you're doing that, just a final reminder to say thank you everyone for joining us today. We'd love to stay in touch with, we know obviously some of you very well, and others would love to stay in touch with you, so you can follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter and Instagram, and we've got an email list as well. We're about to put that in that link into the chat box, but we're creating a new monthly newsletter, which Phoebe mentioned. So we've always had the quarterly roundup, but we're now doing sort of a feature focused emails. The last one was about creating social media strategy and how to deliver it effectively. The next one is going to be a real blast on video content, and we've got a filmmaker, Peter, who's worked with us since we started, and he's got a lot of experience to share with that, as well as the team. So if you're interested in receiving those monthly emails, go along to the email sign up. And Freya and Phoebe have been planning the next webinar, which is going to be, I think, sometime in August now. And I think that slide, the details for that are there. And again, if you want to sign up, a link's coming up on the chat box for that. Other than that, it's nearly 11:30, so it just remains for me to say a big thank you everyone for joining us on this webinar. We've really enjoyed thinking about this topic and sharing our thoughts with you. So we hope to see you again soon for a future one. So thank you again, everyone.
Thank